Hi, Darren and Paul here from CPR Business Advisory.
How you going there?
You would have seen possibly I've been doing some short snippets over the last few days in relation to 6 forms of margin erosion. And Paul and I thought it might be worthwhile today sort of diving a little bit more in detail into one of those points. If you haven't seen those snippets, basically what I was referring to is how I see it is 6 forms of margin erosions that business put themselves through is number one is basically a cost plus culture. You've got number 2 is where you've got a generic pricing approach that businesses apply across their business. 3 is the inability of a business to manage price increases or pass price increases on. Number 4 is a lot of the time over complex pricing structures that they have in place, or inconsistencies in it. Number 5, I find is businesses have a large reliance on discounting to win jobs or to keep customers. And the final one that I sort of touched on in these snippets was, the management misalignment. And I think that's sort of to do with internal culture on approaches. So today, Paul and I will really just spend probably the next 7 or 8 minutes just sort of jumping into the cost plus culture and how that potentially can erode your margin and your bottom line. So what I'm going to sort of briefly touch on is, a lot of the time businesses will look at sort of cost plus as a percentage markup on cost. So basically what this has the potential of doing is having an overpriced product that you're trying to sell into the market, which will often lead to lost sales. And this happens basically if you don't have a clear and accurate view on what your actual build-up of your costs are. So looking at the cost structure, basically, if you're just applying a percentage or a markup to your material costs, then you're potentially doing one of 2 things. One, you're overpricing in the market, so you're going to lose sales to your competitors. Or 2, you're underpriced, and therefore you're going to be eroding your margin and your bottom line on your product range.
And going backwards, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think just on that, knowing your cost is, I'll give you an example. There was a client that we're working with. They had pallets going to a 3PL, and they're paying per pallet rate. And the way that they'd pack it, it was still within the height and weight constraints, but they hadn't packed it all the way. They could fit another 3 rows on. So they were sending 3 full pallets and a half pallet. That half pallet could have fitted on those 3 other pallets. Now, when you think about it, you go, oh, well, that's not too much. But then it's the labor that goes into packing and getting the new pallet out and loading the truck and the cost of all of that, when they could have just gone one box or 2 boxes higher and still been within the weight and height constraints, and being able, and that's leakage, that's margin erosion, and that's not knowing the true costs. And that's where if your costs aren't right, adding that 5% on, you just don't know.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, there's two ways you can, in my mind, you can look at, your cost plus culture that businesses have. So you can look at it from a sales perspective. So basically your sales force is really just adding a percentage markup on the cost of the material landed. So they're incentivized for sales, not incentivized for margin sometimes. So they're basically just adding a percentage on top of the cost. And the other side of thing is basically building up your cost within your business, where the business don't know all the costs that actually should be allocated in and then passed on. So they're missing it. So when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about potential OPEX, so your operational costs that are businesses have to run the business, your rents, your salaries. It's all those costs that come under the line that aren't applied to your pricing structure. So therefore you're missing that. So if you're doing a cost plus, you're missing all that margin, basically you're bleeding. And I guess that then leads into, what is an organization or your business break-even point? And there's so many businesses out there that don't understand what their break-even is. And that's just to keep the doors open, right? Not making any money.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it also comes into A lot of businesses might be dealing business B2B, business to business, or B2C, business to consumer, but they're running the same pricing model, and they're eroding margin that way. So the cost plus approach doesn't work, especially if you've got a sales team that doesn't know the difference between the markets that they're going into.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I mean, a salesperson, I shouldn't say this because I'm sort of pigeonholing all salespeople into the same thing.
Yeah, you're not, but yeah, it's reality.
In reality, they're interested in the sale. They're not interested in, a lot of the time, they're not incentivized or have KPIs that are built around margins, which I think should. I think salespeople should be held accountable for margin, not necessarily their gross sales as well. And this often leads to, the erosion of the overall margin in the business.
One of the things is, if you've got a client that you are going to do some lower pricing on, at least know that you're contributing to overheads, or how much you're contributing to that overheads. And that overhead percentage, you might look at and go, I'm going to be contributing X amount, and that's going to be my overhead eater. It's a big customer, they pay on time, and that's great. So I'm going to run with that lower cost plus. But on another customer, you might say, well, this is my cost. They're going to contribute to that, because I can get that price in the market and from that customer.
Yeah, exactly. And you should also look at your competitors and how they're pricing as well. Like, a lot of the time, your competitors will have factored in these elements of OPEX and all the stuff that Paul and I have talked about. But if you're just doing a pure cost plus, you might have the cheapest product on the market, and you're actually thinking, you're doing really well because you captured the market, but you're actually not making any money.
Leaving it on the table.
Yeah, and they may be dearer for a reason. So, you're winning sales, but it's costing you.
Yeah. Look, I had a client that I was working with recently, and they put their price up by $10, which was a 5% increase on the price, and the competitor moved exactly the same. So it's not necessarily that their main competitor. So it's are there these games that are getting played, and both entities are eroding margin.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I mean, a simplistic way to look at it is, like, if you understand your OPEX component of the business and you use that as a percentage of your sales, and then you look at your costs, which is your true landed costs, which takes into account your freight and everything else for the particular product or service that you're applying, and then you combine it, that's not actually applying a cost plus anymore. You're actually factoring in all the elements to actually deliver a product or service to your customer. And you can then price accordingly and know that you're going to, you then can negotiate and say, well, how much margin do I want to make? And it's going to be your true margin that's going to hit the bottom line.
Definitely.
I mean, we could talk about this a lot more. We wanted to keep it short and sharp. So if you wanted to learn more about what Paul and I can do, or what we have done with businesses, or even want to have a chat to us, please jump on our website. So it's cprba.com.au. Have a look there. There's a phone number on there, survey. By all means, reach out to us and have a chat.
Free resources.
Yeah. And anyway, have a great afternoon or great morning, wherever you are.
Have a good one, guys. We'll talk to you next time.